So on this Father's Day, I thought I would start with a story about my dad. But first, a question. Who here has ever gone pheasant hunting? 1, 2, and me. Huh? Ken? All right. So I'm not sure who thought this was a good idea, but when I was about 6, my dad and my brother took me pheasant hunting. Now, my brother is 12 years older than me, so I get that he and my dad were going out pheasant hunting, but either I begged to go along, or maybe this was the babysitter option for the day. I don't know. But so picture little Sandy with her hair in a ponytail, 2 little pigtails, actually. And I don't know, is pheasant hunting in the fall? Fall, right? So I have my sweatshirt on and my little white Keds, and they put a blaze orange bandana on my head to make sure I wasn't mistaken as a pheasant. And we drive out to a farmer's field in Wisconsin. Probably an uncle or a cousin. We were related to everybody in Black Creek. And we park on the edge of this cornfield. And they tell me that my job is to flush the pheasants, which requires me, at 6, to walk through this cornfield. They put me in front of a row, and they say, all right, your job is to walk down through this cornfield. Just stay in your row until you get to the tractor path, all right, which is, a big dirt road that runs through the middle of this cornfield so the tractors can come through and harvest. So my dad says he's going to be just down a little way on the right. And my brother says he's going to be just down a little way on the left. And the 3 of us are going to flush the pheasants. So I take my little white Keds and I take a step into the cornfield. And I take another step into the cornfield. I cannot see the end of this row. I take a 3rd step into this cornfield, and I am alone. I am absolutely and utterly alone. I can see a little blue sky. The corn stalks are way up here. I cannot see the end of this row. I'm looking through, I don't see my dad. I'm looking over here, I don't see my brother. Now, I could turn around. I'm 3 steps in, right? So I could turn around, but they said they were going to meet me at the other end. So I had no choice. I just started walking down the row. There's some rustling over here. There's some clicking over here. I'm sure the rustling is some wild animal that's going to come and get me. Or a snake. There's got to be snakes in cornfields. The clicking over here, I have decided, is the harvester, or the farmer on his tractor, and I'm about to be harvested as a cob of corn. So there I am. And we're going to leave me there for a little while, walking down this corn row. It's a long, long walk, so I'll be fine. Will come back to me later. And now we're going to go back into time about 2,000 years. We're going to go back to the time that the book of Matthew was written. So the book of Matthew was written something like maybe 60 years after Jesus died. It was written probably not by Matthew. He was probably the disciple. He was probably dead by then. But it was written by someone who was writing to the early Christians. The early Christians thought they were still part of the Jewish religion. They saw themselves as practicing Jews who were just expanding the message of God's presence to all people. And they had experienced, this group of people, had just experienced about 20 years earlier the violent oppression by the Romans and the destruction of their culture because there had been a Jewish uprising. And the Romans came in and they wiped out families and they scattered people and they destroyed the temple, which had been the very center of Jewish life. It was their house of faith, it was where God dwelled, it was around which their entire culture rotated, and it was demolished. As a matter of fact, the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem is just a little tiny part of what's left over of an outside retaining wall of that whole temple complex. That's all that was left. So these people to whom the writer of Matthew is addressing his work have had this destruction of their identity. Our identities are often based on our successes or our connections with other people or our worldview. And for these people, all they have faced is failure, rejection, and loss. And when we experience failure, rejection, or loss, we often feel all alone. That God has abandoned us, that God doesn't exist, and that we are completely and utterly alone in a meaningless world. Now, I know that each of you, when I say these words, failure, rejection, or loss, things start ticking around in your head. You get all your failures. I've got the card catalog going, sorry by mentioning it, but I know you're going through them in your mind. And then rejection. I know it's stirring up something in your heart right now. And of course, loss makes you have this feeling in your gut. And it's because one of those things or each of those things has shaken your identity. But I'm here to tell you this morning the good news that your identity actually can never be shaken because you are a beloved child of God, and you will never, have never, and will never be left alone. Now I know that in your experience you have felt alone. So I want to give you a toolbox so that the next time you have one of these experiences, you have somewhere to go. I want to give you something that will help you heal from the past and the pain that you felt. And actually, that toolbox is right there in those last few verses of the book of Matthew, because Matthew wanted to do the same thing for his readers, wanted to give them a toolbox, a way to read the signs so they never feel alone. Now it's a little theology lesson coming up. It's about the Trinity. Today is Trinity Sunday, and that's the toolbox. Now, the Trinity is a confusing thing, and mostly I think it is because words are just pointers. It's really hard to wrap our mind around the divine and the mystery that we've been able to contact here and then. But I'm going to use them as pointers today, and maybe they'll help you. So, the first part of the Trinity we baptized this morning is the Creator God. Now, I'm wondering if that resonates with you. This morning, did you get up and see the sunrise? Were the birds singing? Maybe last night that full moon in the clear sky with all the stars stirred something inside of you. Or maybe it's the ocean, when you know that you are part of that ebb and flow of the tide, and it called to something inside of you, and you knew for a moment that you are an integral part of the thing that keeps the galaxies swirling and the flowers blooming, and that you are a beautiful part of that creation, an expression of divine presence right now. That's you. That's God in you. So maybe you felt that. Or maybe you felt that through the second person of the Trinity, through Jesus. Jesus, for me, is the embodiment of compassion and empathy. Compassion and empathy is the way in which we connect to other people. And it is through the trials in our lives that we learn to develop compassion and empathy that we can then share with the people around us who are struggling too. Or maybe it's in the receiving of compassion and empathy from other people that you have felt the presence of God. Or maybe it's through the third person of the Trinity, which is the Holy Spirit. Maybe you have connected to that internal place inside of you through music or art or dance or prayer or meditation, where in that space between thoughts, you have come to know intimately the presence of the divine. That's what we were trying to help you understand this year through our programs, talking about make space to listen. God speaks in silence. Maybe we helped you find God there. See, I need to know that I've given you something, that I've equipped you with something, so you never feel alone. As your pastor, I know how hard life can be. And I want to know that when you walk out of these doors today, you've got something to hold on to. So it's through those three things, through the Father or the Creator God, where you can know you're not alone, you're part of creation. Or through Jesus, through that empathy and compassion that flows to you through others, or through you to others, where you know you are not alone. Or through the Holy Spirit, where you turn inside and you know that there rests inside of you the divine itself, and you are never alone. I want you to be able to read the signs. So now it's time to go back to little Sandy. She has been walking through the cornfield. Her little white kids are not so white any longer. But I can finally see the end of the row. Now, I have been alone and scared this whole time. There has been the rustling to my right and the clicking mechanical sounds to my left, and I could not see the end of the row, but now I see it, and I take off running, and I run as hard and as fast as I can, and I come out at the end of the row, and I'm panting. And I look to my right, and there's my dad. And I look to my left, and there's Ben, but also my brother. And they had been walking beside me the whole way. I was never alone. I was never alone. I just didn't know how to read the signs. The rustling, that was my dad walking through the cornfield next to me. The clicking, that was my brother playing with his gun thing. I don't know, it was a noise from his gun. And so I wasn't alone. And if you knew, if you truly understood who walked beside you every moment of every day, you would realize you were never alone and that you would never be afraid. So I want you to take this toolbox out with you. I want you to be able to read the signs. I want you to tell other people how to read the signs so they know they're not alone. And I want you to tell them that we can take Jesus by his word when he says, "Lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the cornfield."